Hi, I'm Madison. I'm a 28-year-old marketing executive who just landed the promotion I've been working toward for 3 years. Senior Marketing Director at Henderson and Associates, the kind of position that comes with a corner office, a salary that finally lets me breathe, and the respect I've been craving since I started in this industry. But the moment I announced this incredible news to my family, my sister Chelsea suddenly collapsed from what she claimed was her chronic pain flaring up. And you know what? I had been recording her on my phone just 20 minutes before that dramatic collapse, and what I captured is going to change everything you think you know about family loyalty and medical emergencies. Have you ever had someone in your life who seems to have a sixth sense for ruining your biggest moments? Someone who always, and I mean always, manages to pull focus right when you're about to shine? Well, stick around because by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly how I learned to deal with that person. And it wasn't pretty. 3 days ago, I got the call that changed my life. My boss, Rebecca Martinez, asked me to come into her office at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. Now, in corporate America, that timing usually means one of two things. You're either getting fired or something really good is about to happen. I'd been putting in 60-hour weeks, had just closed the Morrison account that everyone said was impossible, and honestly, I felt like I deserved some good news for once. "Madison," Rebecca said as I sat down across from her mahogany desk, "I'm not going to beat around the bush. The board met yesterday, and we want to offer you the Senior Marketing Director position. It comes with a $40,000 raise, your own team of 6, and honestly, it's about time we recognized what you bring to this company." I literally had to bite my lip to keep from screaming with joy right there in her office. 3 years of proving myself, of watching less qualified men get promoted over me, of working weekends while my college friends were out living their lives. It all felt worth it in that moment. I managed to say something professional about being honored and excited for the challenge, but inside, I was doing cartwheels. The first person I wanted to tell was my mom. Growing up, Mom always emphasized the importance of family celebration, that when one of us succeeded, we all succeeded. So I called her immediately after leaving Rebecca's office and suggested we have a family dinner on Sunday to celebrate. Mom was thrilled, said she'd make her famous lasagna, and that she'd call Chelsea and Dad to make sure everyone could make it. Now, here's where I need to give you some background about my sister Chelsea. She's 26, 2 years younger than me, and she's been dealing with what she calls chronic pain syndrome for about 4 years now. It started right after she dropped out of college. Something about fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue that makes it impossible for her to work a regular job. The doctors can't find anything definitively wrong with her, but chronic pain is tricky like that, you know. It's not like a broken bone where you can see it on an X-ray. At first, I was completely supportive. I mean, invisible illness is real. And I felt terrible that my little sister was suffering. I helped her apply for disability benefits, drove her to countless doctor appointments, even let her move back into Mom and Dad's house when she couldn't afford her apartment anymore. But over the past couple of years, I started noticing a pattern that made me uncomfortable, and questioning it made me feel like the worst sister in the world. Every time something good happened to me, Chelsea seemed to have a medical crisis. When I got my first promotion 2 years ago, Chelsea had to be rushed to the emergency room with what she said was the worst pain flare-up she'd ever experienced, right during my celebration dinner. When I ran my first half marathon last spring, Chelsea spent that entire weekend bedridden, requiring constant attention and care. When I started dating Mark, a really great guy I met through work, Chelsea had a panic attack at the restaurant where we were having our first double date with my parents. The thing is, when you question someone's pain, especially chronic pain, you automatically become the villain. Chelsea would get teary-eyed and say things like, "I can't help when the pain hits, Maddie. Do you think I want to feel like this?" And Mom would give me these disappointed looks and remind me that family supports each other through difficult times. Dad would just change the subject entirely because he's never been comfortable with medical stuff or family conflict. So, I learned to swallow my suspicions and be the supportive big sister. I rearranged my schedule for her doctor appointments. I brought her special food when she was having bad days. I even postponed that vacation to Italy I'd been planning for 2 years because Chelsea was going through a really rough patch, and Mom thought it would be selfish of me to leave during that time. But something about getting this promotion felt different. This wasn't just any achievement. This was the culmination of everything I'd worked for since graduating college. I had sacrificed so much for this career, including countless family moments and personal relationships. And for once, I wanted to have my moment without it being overshadowed by someone else's crisis. Sunday evening came, and I was honestly more excited than I'd been in years. I bought a nice bottle of champagne, got dressed up in my new blazer that made me feel powerful and professional, and drove over to my parents' house in North Arlington with this huge smile on my face. Mom had set the dining room table with her good china, the wedding set she only brought out for special occasions, and the whole house smelled like garlic bread and homemade marinara sauce. Dad was already at the table reading something on his iPad, and Mom was bustling around the kitchen putting finishing touches on everything. Chelsea was sitting in the living room wearing pajama pants and an oversized hoodie, looking pale and tired like she usually did these days. She gave me a weak smile when I walked in and said, "Hey, Maddie. Mom said you have some kind of announcement?" "I do," I said, trying to contain my excitement. "But let's wait until we're all sitting down. This is big news." During dinner, we made small talk about Dad's golf game and Mom's book club, and I could barely concentrate on the conversation because I was so eager to share my news. Finally, as Mom was clearing the main course plates and bringing out the tiramisu she'd made for dessert, I stood up and raised my champagne glass. "Okay, everyone," I said, feeling my heart pound with excitement. "I wanted to gather you all here tonight because I have incredible news to share. On Friday, I was promoted to Senior Marketing Director at Henderson and Associates. This is the position I've been working toward for years, and it comes with a substantial raise in my own team. I'm so grateful for all your support, and I wanted to celebrate this achievement with the people who matter most to me." For about 3 seconds, there was genuine joy around that table. Dad looked up from his tiramisu with pride in his eyes and said, "Kiddo, that's fantastic. I always knew you had it in you." Mom clapped her hands together and started talking about how proud she was and how hard I'd worked for this. And then Chelsea made this soft, gasping sound. I turned to look at her and she was gripping the edge of the table with both hands, her face suddenly contorted with what looked like intense pain. "Oh no," she whispered, and her voice had that shaky quality it got during her episodes. "Oh no, not now. The pain is getting really bad." Within seconds, she was doubled over in her chair, making these small, whimpering sounds that always made my parents immediately shift into crisis mode. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Mom asked, rushing over to Chelsea's side. "Is it your back again? Your joints?" "Everything," Chelsea gasped, and I watched as genuine tears started streaming down her face. "It's like someone is stabbing me everywhere. I can't make it stop." Dad was already reaching for his car keys. "Should we take her to the emergency room?" he asked Mom, completely forgetting that I was still standing there holding my champagne glass, my big announcement hanging in the air like a deflated balloon. "Let me just try to ride it out for a minute," Chelsea said bravely, which is exactly what she always said. But within about 90 seconds, she was saying she couldn't take it anymore, that this was one of the worst flare-ups she'd had in months. And just like that, my celebration dinner was over. Mom packed up the leftovers while Dad helped Chelsea to the car. I stood in that dining room, still in my new blazer, watching my family rally around my sister's medical emergency exactly 23 minutes after I'd announced the biggest professional achievement of my life. "I'm sorry, honey," Mom said to me as she was grabbing her purse. "We'll celebrate properly once Chelsea is feeling better. This is just really bad timing." Bad timing. That's what it always was. Bad timing. Never manipulation, never attention-seeking, never the convenient coincidence that I'd started to recognize. Just my sister's unpredictable, legitimate medical condition that happened to flare up at the most inconvenient moments possible. But here's the thing. And this is where that video I mentioned comes into play. About 20 minutes before I made my announcement, while Mom was in the kitchen and Dad was outside grilling, I had walked past the living room and heard Chelsea on a phone call. She was speaking quietly, but something about her tone made me pause and listen. She was talking to someone. I later figured out it was her friend Brittany, and she was complaining about having to come to another one of Madison's stupid celebration dinners. She said, and I remember this exactly, "I swear, if I have to sit through her bragging about her job again, I might actually lose it. She acts like she's the only person in this family who's ever accomplished anything." Now, hearing your sister talk about you like that would be hurtful enough under normal circumstances. But what made my blood run cold was what she said next. "I'm already feeling a flare-up coming on anyway. This stress isn't good for my condition." Something about the way she said it, almost like she was planning it, made me incredibly uncomfortable. So I did something I'd never done before. I pulled out my phone, opened the video camera, and started recording. Not because I was trying to catch her in some elaborate lie, but because I wanted to document my own confusion about what I'd just heard. What I captured in the next 15 minutes was my sister Chelsea, the same sister who would be doubled over in agony 20 minutes later, dancing around the living room to music playing through her earbuds. Not gentle swaying or careful movement like someone managing chronic pain. Full-on dancing, jumping up and down, spinning around, laughing at something on her phone. At one point, she actually practiced falling into different positions on the couch like she was rehearsing something. She tried slumping forward with her head in her hands, then leaning back with her hand pressed to her forehead. She even made facial expressions in the mirror across the room, testing out different levels of pain and distress. I stood there filming through the crack in the doorway, feeling like I was watching someone rehearse for a performance, and the sick feeling in my stomach told me that I was about to be the unwilling audience for that performance. When I saw her straightening up and putting her phone away, I quickly closed my camera app and walked back toward the kitchen, my heart pounding with this horrible mixture of anger and disbelief. Had I really just watched my sister practice having a medical emergency? Was she really planning to fake a pain flare-up during my celebration dinner? But even with that video on my phone, I didn't want to believe what I'd seen. This was my little sister, the girl I'd protected from bullies in middle school, the person I'd held while she cried about her first heartbreak. The idea that she would deliberately sabotage my moment felt too cruel to accept. So when she started showing signs of distress right after my announcement, part of me wondered if I'd been wrong. Maybe she really was in pain. Maybe the dancing was her way of trying to feel better before the flare-up hit. Maybe I was being paranoid and suspicious because I'd been feeling resentful about all the attention her condition required. But as I watched my family load her into the car and drive away to the emergency room, leaving me alone in that dining room with my cold lasagna and untouched tiramisu, I knew I had to face the truth about what that video showed, and more importantly, I had to decide what I was going to do about it. Because this wasn't just about one ruined dinner. This was about a pattern of behavior that had been stealing my joy and derailing my achievements for years. This was about my sister potentially using her illness as a weapon, and my family being so afraid of appearing unsympathetic that they'd rather sacrifice my happiness than question her timing. I sat at that table for another hour, replaying the video on my phone and trying to reconcile the dancing, laughing girl on my screen with the sister who was supposedly in agony at the hospital. And for the first time in 4 years, I admitted to myself that something about Chelsea's condition had never felt quite right. The question was, what was I going to do with this evidence? And was I prepared for the consequences of exposing a truth that might tear my family apart? The next morning, I woke up with that video weighing on my mind like a stone in my chest. I'd barely slept, replaying those 15 minutes over and over again. Chelsea dancing, practicing her collapse positions, checking her expressions in the mirror. But I also kept hearing Mom's voice from the night before, calling me from the hospital at 11:30 p.m. to tell me that Chelsea was being admitted for observation because her pain levels were off the charts. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table staring at my phone. The video was right there, 3 minutes and 47 seconds of footage that completely contradicted everything that had happened after my announcement. But showing it to my family felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. What if I was wrong? What if there was some medical explanation for why someone with chronic pain could be dancing 1 minute and hospitalized the next? So I did what any rational person would do. I started researching. I spent the entire morning going through medical websites, chronic pain forums, and fibromyalgia support groups, trying to understand if what I'd witnessed was medically possible. Could someone with Chelsea's condition really go from dancing energetically to being in excruciating pain within 20 minutes? The answer, according to everything I read, was complicated. Chronic pain could indeed be unpredictable, with flare-ups coming suddenly and without warning. Some people with fibromyalgia did report having good moments where they felt normal, even energetic, followed by crashes that left them bedridden. But something about the timing still bothered me. Not just this incident, but the pattern I'd been noticing for years. That's when I decided to do something I'd never done before. I started documenting everything. I opened a new note on my phone and began listing every major event in my life over the past 4 years, alongside Chelsea's medical episodes. The results were disturbing. My college graduation ceremony, Chelsea had a panic attack in the parking lot and had to be taken home before the ceremony even started. My first promotion celebration dinner, emergency room visit for severe joint pain. The weekend I brought Mark home to meet my parents. Chelsea spent both days in bed with what she called the worst migraine of her life. My half marathon, another ER visit, this time for chest pain that the doctors couldn't explain. But it wasn't just my achievements. I started remembering other family events too. When our cousin Jennifer announced her engagement, Chelsea had developed sudden stomach problems that required her to leave the restaurant mid-dinner. When Dad got recognition at work for 30 years of service, Chelsea had called him crying about a pain flare-up that needed immediate attention. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. But I needed more than just my own observations if I was going to confront this situation. So I did something that felt like betraying my sister's privacy, but I was desperate for answers. I started looking through her social media more carefully. Chelsea's Instagram and Facebook accounts were mostly filled with posts about chronic pain awareness, inspirational quotes about invisible illness, and photos of her looking pale and tired. But when I dug deeper into the timestamps, I found some interesting inconsistencies. There were selfies of her looking happy and healthy that had been taken on the same days she'd told our family she was too sick to leave her room. Photos of her out with friends at restaurants and movie theaters during weeks when she'd claimed to Mom that she couldn't keep food down. The most damning evidence came from her Snapchat stories, which disappear after 24 hours, but I happened to screenshot some of them over the months without really thinking about it. In one story from 3 months ago, the same weekend she'd missed my birthday dinner because of a severe flare-up, she was at a concert with friends, dancing and singing along to the music. The timestamp showed it was taken at 9 p.m. on the exact night she'd texted me saying she was in too much pain to even sit up in bed. But the real breakthrough came when I remembered that Chelsea's friend Brittany, the one she'd been talking to on the phone before my announcement, worked at the coffee shop near my office. Brittany and I had always been friendly, and I knew she was the type of person who wore her emotions on her sleeve. If Chelsea had been confiding anything inappropriate to her, Brittany would probably feel uncomfortable about it. So, on Tuesday afternoon, I stopped by the coffee shop during my lunch break. Brittany was working behind the counter, and when she saw me, she got this weird look on her face, like she was guilty about something. "Hey, Madison," she said, avoiding eye contact while she made my usual latte. "I heard about Sunday night. Is Chelsea okay?" "She's been better," I said carefully. "She's still in the hospital, actually. The doctors are running more tests." Brittany nodded, but she looked uncomfortable. That's tough. Chronic pain is so unpredictable, you know." I took a chance. "Brittany, can I ask you something? And I need you to be completely honest with me because this is about my family and I'm really struggling here." She looked around the coffee shop nervously, then leaned across the counter toward me. "What do you want to know? Has Chelsea ever said anything to you about timing her flare-ups? Or feeling like she needs to have episodes during family events?" Brittany's face went white. She looked around again, then whispered, "Madison, I can't. She's my friend, and she trusts me." "Brittany, please, I'm not trying to hurt her. I just need to understand what's really going on, because this is affecting my entire family." She was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with her conscience. Finally, she said, "Look, I can't tell you specific things she said, but maybe you should ask yourself why she always seems to get sick right when you're getting attention. And maybe you should pay attention to how she talks about your achievements when you're not around. That was all the confirmation I needed. Brittany couldn't say it directly, but her implication was clear. Chelsea had been confiding in her about deliberately sabotaging family events. The sick feeling in my stomach got worse, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't a terrible sister for suspecting something was wrong. There really was a pattern, and it really was intentional. That evening, I made a decision that I knew would change everything. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who lived in the house behind my parents' place. Mrs. Patterson was a retired teacher who spent a lot of time in her garden, which gave her a perfect view of my parents' backyard and the windows of Chelsea's room. "Mrs. Patterson," I said when she answered the phone, "I need to ask you something kind of personal, and I hope you don't think I'm being inappropriate. But have you noticed anything unusual about Chelsea's behavior over the past few months?" There was a pause. Then Mrs. Patterson said, "Honey, are you asking because you're worried about her health or because you're worried about something else?" "Something else," I admitted. "Well," she said carefully, "I don't like to gossip about neighbors, but I have noticed that Chelsea seems to be quite active during the day when your parents aren't home. I've seen her in the backyard doing yoga, having friends over, even working in the garden. But whenever I see your mother's car pull up, Chelsea seems to, well, she seems to go back inside and become much more subdued." My heart was pounding. "Mrs. Patterson, did you see her on Sunday before our family dinner?" "Oh, yes," she said. "She was outside around 4 o'clock and she seemed to be practicing some kind of dance routine. Very energetic, lots of jumping around. I thought maybe she was feeling better and getting some exercise. But then I saw the ambulance later that evening, so I assumed she'd had a relapse." I thanked Mrs. Patterson and hung up, feeling like I finally had enough evidence to confront this situation. But I still wasn't sure how to approach it. Should I talk to Chelsea directly? Should I show my parents the video? Should I contact her doctors? The decision was made for me the next day when Mom called to tell me that Chelsea was being discharged from the hospital. "The doctors couldn't find anything specific causing this flare-up," she said, "but they're referring her to a new pain specialist. They think maybe she needs a different treatment approach." "More doctor visits," I said, trying to keep the skepticism out of my voice. "More specialists. Madison, I know this is hard on all of us, but she's your sister. She needs our support right now more than ever." That afternoon, I made a choice that I knew would either vindicate me or destroy my relationship with my family forever. I decided to confront Chelsea directly, but not in the way she would expect. Instead of accusing her or showing her the video immediately, I was going to give her one last chance to come clean. I went to my parents' house while Mom and Dad were at work, knowing Chelsea would be home alone. I found her in the living room wearing the same pajama pants and oversized hoodie from Sunday, looking appropriately frail and tired. "Hey," I said, sitting down across from her. "How are you feeling?" "Terrible," she said, not looking up from her phone. "The pain is still really bad. The doctors don't understand what triggers these episodes." "Chelsea," I said carefully, "can we talk honestly for a minute? Sister to sister?" She looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes that had gotten her out of trouble our entire childhood. "Of course. What's wrong?" "Do you think it's possible that stress might be triggering your flare-ups? Specifically, stress about family events or big announcements?" Her expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker behind her eyes. "I don't know what you mean." "I mean, it seems like you tend to have medical crises during moments when other people in the family are celebrating achievements. And I'm wondering if maybe, subconsciously, you're feeling stressed about those situations." "Are you seriously suggesting that I'm making myself sick on purpose?" she asked, and her voice had that hurt, incredulous tone that usually made me back down immediately. But this time, I didn't back down. "I'm suggesting that maybe you're having anxiety about sharing attention, and that anxiety is manifesting as physical symptoms. It happens to a lot of people, and it doesn't mean you're faking anything." Chelsea stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating her response. Finally, she said, "Madison, I can't believe you would even think something like that. Do you have any idea how much pain I'm in every single day? Do you think I want to spend my life going to doctors and taking medications and missing out on everything?" "No," I said. "I don't think you want to be in pain." But I think you might want the attention that comes with being in pain. And I think you might have figured out, consciously or unconsciously, that medical emergencies are a very effective way to redirect focus when you feel like you're being overlooked. Her face was getting red now, and I could see anger replacing the hurt expression. That's the most disgusting thing anyone has ever said to me. You think I'm some kind of sociopath who fakes being sick for attention? I think you're someone who learned that being sick gets you care and concern and puts you at the center of every family crisis. And I think after 4 years, it's become a pattern that you might not even be fully conscious of. Chelsea stood up abruptly, swaying slightly like the movement had caused her pain. I can't believe this. My own sister thinks I'm lying about being sick. No wonder I'm stressed all the time. I have to deal with accusations like this on top of everything else. And that's when I pulled out my phone. Chelsea, I said quietly, I need to show you something. And after you see it, I want you to explain to me how someone who was dancing and jumping around and practicing facial expressions in the mirror could be hospitalized 20 minutes later. I held up my phone and pressed play on the video. I watched Chelsea's face as she saw herself on the screen, dancing energetically, spinning around, practicing different positions on the couch. I watched her expression change from confusion to recognition to something that looked like panic. When the video ended, we sat in complete silence for about 30 seconds. Then Chelsea said, "That's not what it looks like." "What does it look like?" I asked. I was doing physical therapy exercises. My doctor said movement could help with the pain. Chelsea, I heard you on the phone with Brittany. I heard you complaining about my celebration dinner and saying you could feel a flare-up coming on, and then I watched you practice falling into different positions like you were rehearsing something. Her composure finally cracked. She started crying. Real tears, not the strategic tears I'd seen during her episodes. Madison, you don't understand. It's not like I'm completely faking everything. I do have pain, but it's complicated. Then explain it to me, I said, trying to keep my voice gentle despite the anger I was feeling. Help me understand what's really going on. She was quiet for a long time, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie. Finally, she said, "Do you remember what it was like growing up? You were always the smart one, the responsible one, the one who got good grades and made Mom and Dad proud, and I was just there. Average grades, no special talents, no clear direction. Chelsea, that's not true. You were good at so many things, but nothing that mattered to Mom and Dad the way your achievements did. And when I got sick, when this chronic pain started, suddenly I mattered. Suddenly I was important. Suddenly everyone was worried about me and taking care of me and making sure I was okay." I felt my heart breaking and hardening at the same time. "So you decided to stay sick?" "It's not that simple," she said, her voice getting louder. "I really do have pain sometimes. I really do have bad days. But maybe sometimes I exaggerate it. Maybe sometimes I make it seem worse than it is because I'm afraid that if I get better, I'll go back to being invisible." "And the timing?" I asked. "The way your worst episodes always happen during my big moments?" She looked down at her hands. "I know how that looks, and I know it's not fair to you. But when you're celebrating something, getting all this attention and praise, it makes me feel small, forgotten. And yes, sometimes I do feel my symptoms get worse when I'm emotionally stressed about something like that. But Chelsea, the video shows you were fine 20 minutes before my announcement. You were dancing and laughing." "I was trying to psych myself up," she said desperately. "I was trying to be happy for you, to get myself in a good mood for your celebration. But then, when you made your announcement and everyone was so excited and proud, I felt this wave of sadness and jealousy, and yes, my pain did get worse. Maybe not as bad as I made it seem, but it did get worse." I stared at my sister, trying to process this partial confession. She was admitting to exaggerating her symptoms, to being jealous of my achievements, to deliberately stealing focus during my celebrations. But she was still insisting that her underlying condition was real, that she wasn't completely fabricating everything. "Chelsea," I said, "I need you to understand something. Whether your pain is completely real, partially real, or mostly psychological, The way you've been handling it has been devastating to this family. You've ruined countless celebrations, caused our parents enormous worry and expense, and made me feel guilty for achieving anything positive in my life." She was crying harder now. "I know, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. But it did get this bad, and now I have to decide what to do about it." "What do you mean?" I looked at my phone, still displaying the last frame of the video. "I mean, I have evidence that you were perfectly fine 20 minutes before your dramatic collapse on Sunday night. I have documentation of a pattern of your medical emergencies coinciding with family celebrations. And I have a neighbor who can testify to seeing you active and healthy during times when you've told our parents you were bedridden." Chelsea's face went white. "You wouldn't." "I don't want to. But I also can't keep enabling this behavior and watching it destroy our family. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell Mom and Dad the truth about Sunday night. You're going to admit that you exaggerated your symptoms because you were jealous of my promotion. And you're going to get real help, not from another pain specialist, but from a therapist who can help you deal with whatever underlying issues are causing you to use illness as a coping mechanism." "And if I don't?" I held up my phone. "Then I'll show them this video and I'll tell them everything I've discovered." "And Chelsea, I don't think you want our parents to see the evidence I've gathered about your behavior patterns over the past 4 years." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, probably calculating whether she could spin this situation somehow. Finally, she said, "When?" "Tonight, when they get home from work. We're going to sit down as a family and you're going to tell them what really happened Sunday night." "What if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm lying about everything?" "Then that's a consequence you'll have to face." "But Chelsea, this has to stop. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life watching you sabotage family celebrations and manipulate everyone's emotions. Either you get help and start being honest, or I'm going to make sure Mom and Dad know exactly what's been going on." That evening, our family sat around the same dining room table where I'd made my promotion announcement 3 days earlier. But this time, it was Chelsea who had something to say. With my phone sitting on the table between us, the video queued up and ready to play if she tried to backtrack, Chelsea finally told our parents a version of the truth. She admitted that she'd been feeling jealous and overlooked, that her pain sometimes got worse when she was emotionally upset, and that she might have overreacted to her symptoms on Sunday night. Mom cried. Dad looked stunned and disappointed, but most importantly, they started asking the right questions. About therapy, about the pattern of episodes during family events, about getting psychological help alongside medical treatment. It wasn't a complete confession, and it wasn't the dramatic confrontation I'd imagined, but it was a start. And for the first time in 4 years, I felt like I could celebrate my achievements without waiting for the other shoe to drop. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Chelsea would need real help to address whatever psychological issues had led her to this point. My parents would need time to process how they'd been manipulated, and I would need to learn how to rebuild trust with a sister who had weaponized her illness against my happiness. But as I sat at that table, watching my family finally have an honest conversation about what had been happening, I knew I'd made the right choice. Sometimes love means holding people accountable. Sometimes protecting your family means refusing to enable their destructive behavior. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be silent anymore,